Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a little break from the classic Guyanese dishes and I'm going to be showing you guys a Trini dish. It's nothing other than the most popular Trini street food out there. I'm going to be showing you guys my recipe for doubles today. Now I've been perfecting this recipe for a little while now, so this way I can get those perfect soft baras, the most flavorful chana ever, and all of those condiments really make it. So today I'm going to be showing you guys my doubles recipe, and this is as close as it gets to the ones that you get in the roti shops, and you guys are really going to enjoy it. So let's get into the recipe. Here are all of the ingredients that I'm going to need to make my doubles today. For the dough or for the bara, what I'm going to need is some all-purpose flour. I'm also going to need some turmeric, and we also call this dye. I have some salt, a little bit of sugar, and this is to help activate the yeast. And I have my yeast here. I have a little bit of oil that's going to help smoothen out the dough. And I'm going to need some extra oil later to help me fry up my chana, as well as fry the baras in the end. I also have some water to bring together my dough and to cook the chana mixture. And for the actual chana that goes inside the bara, we have some chana here, and this is dry chana that I soaked. Now you can either soak this overnight, so this way they can plump up and it reduces the cooking time, or you could just soak it for a couple hours like I did. I just put some hot boiling water onto the dried beans and I let it soak for about 4 hours, and they've doubled in size. So it's going to take a little longer to cook, but that's perfectly fine. I also have a little bit of dhal here, and you could use just the yellow dhal, or if you can only find the green one, that's okay, or if they're mixed like mine, that's okay as well. And as far as the seasonings, I have some chopped garlic, some chopped onion, chopped pimento peppers. I have some of my homemade green seasoning, and if you guys want to see how to make this, I'll have the recipe linked right above here and in the description box down below. Now this does contain pimento peppers, so if you wanted to, you could omit the fresh pimento peppers. I just like to add them in because I find it gives a nice added flavor to the chana. And for my spices, I have a little bit of ground jeera, I have some curry powder, and this is just a regular curry powder. I have a little bit of turmeric or dye, and a little bit of amchar masala. And this is a little tip that I learned. In order to get that chana to boil a little faster, we're going to use a little bit of baking soda. This baking soda is going to help the chana cook faster and get nice and soft. So let's get into the cooking process, guys. The first step when making doubles is to actually work on the filling. So in my pot here, I have a small pot and I just filled it up with a little bit of water. And I'm going to go in with all of my dhal. Now remember, whenever you're making dhal, you want to make sure to wash it really well before you cook it. So I have all of my dhal in there, and I'm going to go ahead and add in a generous amount of salt. This is salt to taste, of course. And we're going to let this dhal boil until it is totally disintegrated and totally smooth. Now I added the salt in there because if you didn't add salt into the dhal, it's not going to boil properly and it's not going to get smooth. It's going to boil very gritty and not come together in the end. So this is going to take about 20 to 30 minutes to finish boiling and get nice and smooth how I want it. And I'm going to come back and show you guys what this looks like. While the dhal starts to boil, you're going to see a lot of foam come off the top of the dhal. You want to go ahead and go in with your spoon and just skim it all off. And you might have to do that a couple times as it's boiling, so just make sure you keep on watching it. Once you put all of that dhal to boil, what you're going to want to do is get another pot and get a larger one, and you're going to fill it with water. And once that water comes up to a boil, you're going to go in with all of your soaked chana. And then once you go in with the chana, you're going to go in with the baking soda. And remember what I said, the baking soda is going to help it cook much faster. And I'm going to go in with a little bit of salt as well. You just want to stir it up. And we're going to let it boil until it's just about halfway cooked. Just like I said with the dhal, if you see any impurities float to the top or any foam come to the top, you're going to want to go ahead and skim it off. And it might happen a couple times throughout the cooking process, so just watch out for that and keep skimming it off. While your chana as well as your dhal are boiling, you want to go ahead and start working on the dough, because this dough has to sit and rise for about an hour or two. So into my flour, I'm going to go in with my turmeric or my dye. And this is totally up to you. You can use as much or as little as you want. I know some people, when they make their doubles, they don't like it to be too yellow, and some like it to be more yellow than others. So this is totally based on your preference. And I'm going to go in with some granulated sugar. You could use brown sugar if you wanted to. I'm also going to go in with some yeast. And I'm going to go in with some salt. The salt's just going to help give it a little bit of flavor and not make it bland. And once you go in with all of these ingredients, we're gonna mix it up so this way they can get combined. And then we're gonna slowly start going in with a little bit of water. And once you add the water in, you wanna keep mixing. You wanna make sure to knead this dough soft, just like if you were making sada roti or dal puri. And you just wanna add the water in a little bit at a time. You don't wanna add too much water, but you still want this to be a nice soft dough. So I'm going to keep adding water a little bit at a time, and I'm going to keep bringing my flour and all of the other ingredients together. So I finished mixing in all of the water little by little, and as you guys can see, I have a really nice soft dough here. It's a little sticky, but it's not too hard to handle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in with a few teaspoons of oil, just about 2 teaspoons, and I'm actually going to knead this a little more. It's like when you're making any type of dough, you could punch it down a little bit, gather around the ends, and keep kneading for a little bit. And as you guys can see, this dough is really easy to handle. It's a little softer than when I made my sada roti and the dal puri roti. It's going to be a little softer. So you don't want it to be as hard as a regular roti dough. You want it to be just a little softer, a little more sticky. Because if you make the dough too hard for the doubles, the end product's going to be pretty tough. And if you make it too soft, that soft dough is actually going to be more saturated with the oil. And it's going to be less enjoyable. So I'm going to keep on kneading this for about 5 minutes. And after the 5 minutes, when it comes together, I'm going to cover it with a damp paper towel, or you could put a tea towel over it, or you could even use saran wrap for this. And I'm going to let it sit for about an hour to an hour and a half, or just until the mixture doubles in size. My chana was boiling for about 30 minutes in the pot. And as you guys can see, the chana is just about tender. It's like halfway done. When you mash it, it's easy to mash, but it has a little give to it. And you can feel the grain inside still. So it still needs time to boil. This is how you want it. This is the same pot that I had the chana cooking in, but since I drained it, I'm going to use it back to make the mixture for the actual doubles. So I'm going to add in just a few tablespoons of oil. Once you go in with that oil and it heats up a little bit, we're going to add in our garlic, our pimento pepper, as well as our chopped onion. And we're just going to cook these ingredients up for about 5 minutes, just until they become a little golden brown and very fragrant. It's been about 3 minutes now, and as you guys can see, all of those veggies started to get a little golden brown color on them, and they just started getting a little translucent. So I'm going to go in with all of my spices. Remember, I have the ground cumin or ground geera. I have a little bit of amchar masala, a little bit of dhal or tumeric, and a little bit of curry powder. So those are going to go straight in. We're just going to stir those around. And my heat is on a medium-low heat right now. And we're just going to parch or patch these spices or toast them in the hot oil just until they become nice and fragrant. You want to cook it so this way that raw curry taste cooks off. Now, this is different from when you're making a traditional chana curry or curry chana, because doubles chana is supposed to be a little lighter than a real curry is. So this is why we add less spices, and it's not my usual curry preparation, but I promise you guys it's going to be amazing in the end. These spices have been cooking with the seasonings in the pot for about 2 minutes now, and it's become really nice and fragrant. So I'm going to go in with a couple tablespoons of water. That's going to help me create a nice sauce to cook chana in. And I'm also going to go in with half of my green seasoning. I'm saving the other half to go on top of the chana when it's done. So you want to cook this for an additional 2 minutes, just until this sauce or this slurry thickens up again. Once you start seeing the oil separate from this spice mixture, it's time to go in with all of your chana. And you're going to stir this around for about another 2 minutes, just so this way the chana can bunjay a little bit in all of these spices. And then we'll go on with some water a little after. So my chana has been bunjaying for about 2 minutes with all of those spices. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and cover this whole mixture with water. And we're going to give that a stir. As you guys can see, this mixture is much lighter than a normal curry chana or chana curry would be. That's exactly how you want your doubles chana to end up looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with a little bit of salt. Now I'm only adding a little bit now just to keep building all the flavors, because remember when we boiled the chana we had added some salt, and remember that dal has salt in it as well. So I just added in a pinch right here just so we could keep building up those flavors. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cover this, leave it on a medium heat. You can actually lower the heat a little bit if it starts to get too thick, but I'm going to cover it for right now, and I'm going to let the chana cook until it starts to get more tender and more mushy. This is what my chana looks like after about 20 minutes of boiling. Remember, I did have it covered, and once you take one of them and mash it against the pot, it mushes really well. So this just needs a few minutes just so this liquid can thicken up, but before I let it cook, I'm going to go in with all of my dal that I boiled. This dal took about 40 minutes to cook and get nice and soft and smooth. And what the dal really does to the dish is it helps make the chana really silky and really adds to the flavor of the dish. So we're going to stir this around, and I'm going to crank up my heat from that medium low to a medium high heat, and I'm going to let this bubble away until it thickens up much more. And you don't want to let it get too thick, because if it does, when you go to serve it, it's going to be way too thick on those baras or the fried pieces of dough. So I'll show you guys what it looks like when it's ready to come off the heat though. After I added in my dal, I allowed this whole mixture to boil for about 15 to 20 minutes. As you guys can see, the liquid inside, or the gravy, has thickened up a good bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add in all of the green seasoning. This is the other half that I had reserved so we could stir at the end. The addition of the green seasoning at the end of the cooking process really does help to uplift the flavor of the dish. Being that this was cooking for so long, it's going to brighten up all of the flavors. So what we're going to want to do now is go ahead and take our potato masher and start to mash a little bit. You don't want there to be whole chanas all over this mixture. You want some of them to be mushed, and you want a couple of whole pieces in there. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to mash it up, and this step totally depends on your preference. Some people like a really mushy chana center for their doubles, and some people actually like to see a lot of the whole chanas in there. This is what the dough looks like after about an hour and a half of rising. Basically what you want is for that dough to get very puffy and for it to almost double in size. So at this point we're going to move on and start forming our baras. What I've done with the dough is I've broken it into smaller portions, and the portions that you make are going to depend on the size that you prefer. Some people like their doubles bigger and some people like them smaller than others. So what you want to do is get a little bit of oil down onto a plate, and then you're going to put the piece of dough down and oil your fingers as well, and you're going to start to press down and spread it out. You want to spread it out until it's nice and thin, but not too translucent, or else it might turn very hard in the oil. So as you guys can see, I'm spreading it out. Any little tears or holes, I'm just piecing it back together, and now it's ready to fry. Once you've gone ahead and formed the bara, what you're going to want to do is add it into some oil that's been preheated to a medium high to a high heat. You want it to be very hot so this way it cooks really fast and doesn't suck up any oil. What you want to do as soon as it goes in is flip it once, you're going to flip it again, and you're literally only going to cook this for about 30 seconds in that hot oil. After that, you want to take it out, or else it could turn very hard. Once all of my baras finished frying, I put them in this airtight container lined with a tissue. And once they're done frying and you put them all in here, you want to cover it and leave it covered until you're ready to serve. So this way that steam inside can keep them nice and soft. As you guys can see, the baras are so pliable and so soft when you squeeze it in your hand, and it still keeps its shape. When you pull on it, it has a little give to it. It doesn't just loose away quick, and they're really nice and soft. So I cannot wait to go ahead and dish this up. And I have my sauces and condiments all ready to go. So I'm going to show you guys what the end product looks like. Now we're going to go ahead and prepare one of the doubles. So what you want to do is get 2 of those baras onto a plate, or you could put it on some parchment paper or wax paper like I'm using here. And then what you're going to do is put as much or as little chana as you would like onto the baras. I like a medium amount, not too much, not too little. And then I'm going on with some of my homemade tamarind sauce or tamarind sour. I have that recipe on my channel and it'll be linked right up here. I also have some cucumber chutney going on the top as well. I'll have a recipe for that in the future, so be on the lookout for that. And then I'm also going to go on with a little bit of mango achar. All of my Trini followers might know this as kuchela. So I'll have a recipe for that as well in the future. But what we're going to do now is get ready to serve this bad boy. At this point, you can either gather both ends of the parchment paper and go ahead and wrap the doubles, or you can serve it open face. I really hope you enjoyed this delicious recipe today, guys. These doubles were amazing. I hope you go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you're not yet. Like this video and go ahead and leave your comments down below. Bye guys.